All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michelle Sakurka, and I serve as the president and CEO of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, the largest statewide business association in the country, representing approximately 1 million jobs across our great state of New Jersey. I'd like to give a special thank you to our program partners today, the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition and Einstein's Alley. Along with the coalition and Einstein's Alley, we would like to thank NJM, Domain Computers, and Association Master Trust for their partnership. Now, a few housekeeping rules before we begin. For the maximum benefit of the discussion, I encourage you to change your screen view from gallery to speaker. And if you're not sure how, the team will put some directions in the chat. And while I'm speaking about the chat, I encourage you to please use the chat throughout the program to keep the program interactive and also to pose your questions to our panelists. Today's program, Opening the International Talent and Labor Pipeline, couldn't be more timely. Pre-COVID, we had our hiring challenges, acknowledging that we have deep skill gaps in our workforce. And while we had tens of thousands of vacant employment opportunities pre-COVID, because of this, COVID has now only exacerbated the situation. First, the skill gap has widened even more. Quoting Dr. Joel Bloom of NJIT, we're seeing skill gaps today that we were not expecting to see until 2024 due to technology advances over the past year during COVID, which again have only accelerated. This requires new and quick turnaround certification and credential programs to immediately upskill our workforce. And of course, absent that workforce, we rely on the line. But marry this with the lack of a J1 visa program, and we are experiencing a hiring and employment crisis right now like never before. Yes, this affects our STEM jobs, but also threatens our tourism season, where the industry relies heavily on these visa programs for their workforce needs. Absent the visa program, we might say, well, doesn't this create more opportunities for our homegrown workforce? However, this is not the case. Again, we've relied on the international workforce historically to fill jobs our workforce isn't historically attracted to. And now we have another significant challenge, the current state of unemployment in New Jersey. You would think that with the highest rate of unemployment in the nation and with the state slowly reopening, that we should be filling jobs left and right. Incorrect. Frontline workers are not applying, and in big part because of the unemployment insurance enhancement programs coming from the federal government right now, which makes unemployment actually more attractive. Now, we have ideas on how to address these challenges through comprehensive policies and proactive actions. And that is what brings us together today. With a focus on the international pipeline, we ask ourselves today, how can immigration policy promote economic recovery and growth? What is the current state of play in Washington on immigration reform? And how can we revive a bipartisan consensus on immigration? To MC this great program today, it is my pleasure to introduce Katherine Kish, the Executive Director of Einstein's Alley. Katherine, well, first of all, Einstein's Alley is a private nonprofit economic development initiative whose mission is to foster New Jersey's innovation economy and strengthen New Jersey's technology sector through collaboration, coordination, communication, and advocacy. Katherine is also president of Market Entry, Inc., a strategic marketing and business development firm specializing in launching or repositioning products, services, and enterprise. Katherine's a fellow of Lead New Jersey, was named to the New Jersey Biz Top 50 Businesswomen in New Jersey, and was honored as a Woman of Distinction by the Girl Scouts and the Princeton YWCA, as well as Humanitarian of the Year by the New Jersey chapter of the American Conference on Diversity. On a personal note, Katherine is a super collaborative person and extremely passionate. I don't just consider her a colleague, but I consider her a friend as well. Katherine, I turn it over to you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Michelle. What a beautiful way to launch our discussion this morning. The weather is good, and we hope the wind will not blow too strong and take us off the air, but we'll talk right now. So the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition and Einstein's Alley are so excited to be doing another program with NJBIA. This is wonderful. We all know our immigration policy is complex because immigration is a legal issue, a labor issue, a security issue, and a foreign policy issue. Yet immigrants they see it simply. Mostly, they want to work. Some want to study. And that's what draws immigrants to the United States. They have heard that life can be better here. You know, according to Tom Friedman, the New York Times columnist, we have been lucky. Brains are distributed evenly around the world, but America's great advantage has been that while we are just 4% of the world's population, we've attracted many high energy, high aspiring workers and high IQ risk-taking entrepreneurs. And he says immigration is America's lifeblood. So this morning we are here to learn more about and recognize the positive impact of immigrants on New Jersey's talent pipeline. I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Jorge Lima. Jorge is Vice President of Immigration at Stand Together and Senior Vice President of Policy at Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity is a grassroots organization dedicated to advancing policy solutions in areas like immigration. Earlier, Jorge was the Executive and Policy Director of the Libre Initiative. Prior to that, he served as Strategic Policy Advisor to the Governor of Puerto Rico, and he began his career as an attorney for the city of Miami and later practiced at the law firm Holland and Knight. Jorge is a member of the Florida Bar, a graduate of the University of Miami. He holds a JD from Georgetown University, and he is a member of the Aspen Institute for Global Leadership Network. Having worked in both private and public sectors, he brings extensive experience in policy development and its impact on the economy, on business, and on communities. We are delighted to have him with us today. Jorge?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I share the sentiments on the wind. I'm supposed to be on a flight later today, so hoping that the wind doesn't cause any sort of delay. I also will ask for your patience a little bit because I'm on my second shot, so excited to have my second vaccination, but it is throwing me off a little bit. So if I seem a little distracted or a little loopy, it's thanks to Moderna, but excited that I was able to get that second shot. So I want to start, of course, with a big sense of gratitude to Nick and the entire team at New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition and all of the partners who brought this together. Stand Together and AFP are proud to kind of join this echo of voices who is trying to make a difference here on immigration. Stand Together, for those who may not have heard of our organization, is a large philanthropic community that focuses on key issues through different paths at getting the changes that we want to see made. We know that some issues that the country is facing are not just reform focused. Some will take changes on the government level, but also will take changes throughout different key institutions in our society, including communities, business, and education. And so we take a really holistic approach at solving some of these large problems. Through Americans for Prosperity, that is a focus on the public policy reforms that need to get done as part of the holistic strategies to tackle some of these large problems that the country faces. And one of those, as mentioned, is immigration. We focus on immigration because at the core of who we are, we believe in people, and we believe in all people. That includes immigrants and citizens. And we also believe that part of America's history, her present and her future, will continue to be this embrace of being open and welcoming to the contributions, the ideas, the cultural differences, and just pure grit that immigrants tend to bring to the country so that they can improve their lives while at the same time improving the lives of those around them already in the country. And so with that, we are just honored. I am personally honored to be here speaking with all of you, getting to learn more from the folks that you will hear later on this panel, and particularly about the stories that truly highlight the immigrant contribution to the great state of New Jersey. And so I'm excited to learn, but also to speak just a little bit here at the top of the meeting of the way that we are looking at the issue of immigration and why we think it's so important to tackle it now. So I'll start with that. Why immigration, and why would we be talking about this issue right now? Certainly, the country is facing a number of issues that many people are concerned about, right? You can start with anything from the pandemic to the economic recovery that we're hoping to see, the state of our healthcare systems, and really just the overall divisiveness that continues to kind of plague our country at the moment and divide people, communities, and families. While those are all certainly important, and AFP does focus its strategies across many of those, I will also say that from our personal experience and our own research and engagement, immigration is one of those issues that actually has an impact on all of those. and if left ignored, can truly increase the gap between what we think is success and what we think is lagging. And so that's why I think immigration is so important. For many folks, they don't even experience the immigration process. Many folks across America don't have to endure the process, have never been in a business where they have to try to hire or search for labor and have to endure the immigration process. And so for many, it is used as a political tool every cycle. And unfortunately, that's where we've been for the past couple of decades when it comes to the issue of immigration. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that immigration does impact everyone on a much more local and personal level. So what is it that we actually need to aim for? Where would we want to go? And let me explain some of the reasons that I think it's critical, more specifically, why we address the issue of immigration. As many of you saw this week, the new 2020 census numbers were released. And it was reported that in the past 10 years, the United States saw the slowest population growth it has seen in 8 decades. Many of you are business owners here, you know exactly what that means. That means that a lagging birth rate and slow immigration equals less individuals in the workforce. And if we have aging populations that are entering retirement, that calls into question not just our economic growth moving forward, but also the stability of our safety net for those individuals who are ready to move into the retirement age. There's also costs on the human level, right? Individuals who want to come and work here are facing huge wait times. If you are one of the lucky ones who's in a preference category, your average wait time to enter the United States is more than 4 years. If you are someone coming in through either a refugee or asylum process, you're looking at anywhere between 1 to 10 years of a waiting time before your case is even heard within a immigration court. In terms of economic growth, there are estimates out there that put that every 10 years the country fails to address its immigration issue, we are losing upwards of $1.5 trillion in economic growth over those 10 years. And of course, the economic growth is much more personal. When you start looking at particular industries in New Jersey, for example, there's already been reporting this year of labor shortage scares occurring for those businesses who are getting ready at the Jersey Shore for the upcoming busy season. Many of those are looking for a much better rebound given the year that we experienced last year, and already see that they're just not having access to the labor force that they need in order to meet the demands that they're really hoping to expect. But beyond workforce, there's also the issue of innovation. Immigrants have a much higher rate of founding businesses than the overall US population. These entrepreneurs not only contribute to the economy by terms of their ideas, but those businesses tend to create jobs for other individuals as well. In New Jersey, there's an estimated 135,000 immigrant entrepreneurs, and their businesses in 2019 were able to see incomes of nearly $4 billion just on an annual basis. Last, I would say the cost of what is happening here is the system itself is just drawing attention and focusing on the wrong parts, which have significant costs in terms of our government spending. And again, thinking about the immigrants that are seeking to come in. Right now, there's an estimated 915,000 skilled workers that are stuck in line for green cards. If you extend that timeline out, there are some estimates that say that over 185,000 of those are more likely to die than they are to actually make it through the green card process. Meanwhile, for those who do enter through our employment immigration systems, it is estimated right now that the system gives more than half of those visas to the immigrant family. Meaning, if I am able to bring in an immigrant for skilled work, the next visa goes to the spouse or the children, and all of those count towards that employment cap versus the cap being specifically for the immigrant workforce. So all of those employment-based visas are not actually going one-to-one to the actual workforce that we're hoping to bring in. So what is a better way? If that is the sense of unease, if that is the cost of what we're seeing, if we leave immigration as we've done for the past 3 decades without any sort of solution, what actually could we do right now to get immigration reform through the halls of Congress and hopefully into the table of the White House? As many of you saw in his presentation this week, President Biden made a call for such action. Not only did he present his overall comprehensive approach, but he opened the door to allowing the country to work on the places where they have common ground. And this is a huge proponent for us at Stand Together and at Americans for Prosperity. When we look across public polling, when we talk to individuals in the communities that we are located, it is apparent to us that there is just so much more common ground that many actually believe. Gallup has reported that those who believe that immigration is good for the country is now over 75% of the population. And that is a historic high for that poll, which they have been tracking now for several years. Again, that's contrary to what many would believe, given the amount of divisiveness that we're seeing on this issue. Yet Americans are speaking very highly about the need to ensure that we have an immigration system. Many Americans believe that America can be both welcoming and secure, and that is in fact what they hope to see. They want an immigration system. They want one that is both fair and that it's welcoming. And that is what we've been asking for Congress to do. For too often, though, each party tends to believe that it can write its own immigration system and that they can then ask for all or nothing. And unfortunately, what we've gotten over the past 3 decades is the latter, nothing. There's been no significant improvements to our immigration system since the late 80s, early 90s. And now you're starting to see a lot more of that consequences, given the amount of legal immigration decreases that we saw over the last couple of years. So if we can get folks to focus on the common ground and actually get them to move on the places where there is agreement, the notion is that you can start to build momentum to slowly start addressing each of the components of immigration. Many of us that are involved in the immigration space understand that there are various components. Of course, there's the legalization question, there's also the security question, there's a humanitarian question, and there's the overall question of future flows and how you will welcome the immigrants of tomorrow. The problem is doing all of that in one shot has proven unsuccessful. So what if we tried an approach where you can focus on the things where there is broad agreement, show the country that it is okay to come together on the issue of immigration, and start to move away from this very divisive issue into one where folks can enter the debate with a sense of collaboration and common ground. Many are going to say that this is impossible. And in fact, that is exactly what we heard when we were engaged in our criminal justice reform efforts back in 2018. Under then President Trump, many believed that there was no chance that there would be any significant improvement to criminal justice reform. And yet we saw the opposite, because both individuals and organizations on both sides were able to come together and agree that it was not an all or nothing approach, but rather focused on where they had common ground. And we did see eventually, even though people said it was impossible, literally up until the day it went to the Senate floor, a bill on criminal justice reform that got more than 80 votes in the Senate and was eventually signed by President Trump. That is the model that we seek to follow here on immigration reform, and one that I hope we can all join together in to get something moving. So how do we actually get that done? It is not easy. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because it takes a large amount of commitment and trust. Building coalitions across the aisle and working with individuals from both sides require that you allow individuals to remain with their identity and yet still create a level of trust where there won't be any sort of backstabbing, to put it bluntly, when it comes time to actually make the negotiations. What it requires, though, in order to get all of that done, is a variety of different voices. And that is the appeal that I will make to all of you participating in today's call. Events like these are critical. It is important for us to come together as local communities and share the specific stories and the specific threats and ideas that we have for the state of New Jersey. But it is also crucially important that you all share those stories far beyond just these calls. We have heard so many times from champions on their in Capitol Hill that even being part of these types of events have put them in the crosshairs of the extremes that prefer the status quo on immigration. So while it may seem small, having individuals who speak out on immigration, even if it's just a panel, requires a showing from all of us who want to see reform, some sort of support indicator, some sort of applause, in order to continue encouraging individuals, because those who are demanding the all or nothing approach or prefer the status quo will be there to hit them. We have to make sure that we are there to support them. The second thing I would mention is your stories. Again, some of that feels very personal, and it's hard to envision how these stories can make a huge difference. But the stories actually arm policy champions to make the arguments needed when they are confronted with opposing views. If they know about the particular restaurant on the Jersey Shore, if they know about the individual immigrant who is opening up his or her new shop in New Jersey, if they know about the manufacturing companies in New Jersey who are struggling to find the labor force, those are all critical stories that allow policy champions who know that this is the right thing to do. It arms them with the types of stories and examples that are needed in order to move forward. We have to be there at every turn. Groups like ours cannot just show up and support someone when it's a final vote on the floor of either the House or the Senate. We need to be there when they're having conversations, when they are on panels, when it's reported that they are meeting with individuals. All of the moments, all of those inflection points provide an opportunity for us to support and encourage individuals in Capitol Hill to move forward with this type of progress. Again, without that, we have heard that the opposition continues to hit them very hard, which then discourages them from moving forward. This call for bipartisanship needs to be clear. And in fact, sometimes it's not even bipartisanship, it could simply be nonpartisanship. The issue of immigration has been used for far too long as a divisive issue to attract voters every 2 or 4 years to the polls. It is time for individuals seeking elected office to know that we demand them to actually work together and find solutions. The one-party solution does not seem to work. It has not worked over 30 years. Let's try a different approach. There is so much common ground that we can focus on. And by starting the conversation like that, you can then lead to better opportunities and better solutions. We're not saying that we're naive. There's a lot of differences and a lot of different views on immigration shared by many people throughout the country. But if that is exactly where we focus first, then there will absolutely be no movement. Rather, it is time to focus where we actually do agree. Let that be a showcase for individuals to see how it is okay to work on immigration, how the right immigration policies are actually good policy and good politics. Those are critical for us to actually see momentum build and movement on the issue of immigration. I thank you again for letting me be part of today's panel. It's exciting to see the progress and the interest from New Jersey, and I look forward to many, many more conversations to come. Thank you.
I forget. Everybody forgets. So you've just seen me do it. Remember to unmute yourself when you come back on. What I was saying is good policy, good politics. Thank you, Jorge. That was a very, very comprehensive and useful talk. I really appreciate that. I'd now like to introduce and welcome Ryan Stark-Lillianthal, who will be moderating a distinguished panel of experts that he will introduce. Ryan, with the firm of Hardington King in English, has practiced immigration law for over 20 years and serves on the steering committee of the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition. He is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is also a member of NJBIA. And he has previously served as AILA's New Jersey chapter's legislative liaison and advocacy chair. As an immigrant rights advocate, Ryan has co-chaired Einstein's Alley's Immigration and Employment Task Force, as well as the American Jewish Committee New Jersey Chapter Immigration Task Force. Ryan also serves on the advisory board of the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, LALDEF, an organization of which he was a founding member. Ryan, over to you.
Thanks, Katherine. And it's my privilege and honor to be introducing the panel and moderating the panel today. And I just, as a reminder to everybody, to use your chat function and post your questions in there. And we'll have a Q&A session after all of the panelists have a chance to speak, and we'll be joined by Jorge Lima at that time as well. Immigration, which is often reduced to slogans and stereotypes, is an extremely complex and challenging topic, one that must be looked at from a variety of perspectives. In this panel, we're going to take a look at how immigration impacts various sectors of the economy. We can't possibly cover every topic fully, but we hope you will gain some understanding of the crucial importance of immigration to the success of the New Jersey economy. In order to cover as much ground as possible, we've asked each of our panelists to limit their introductory remarks to no more than 5 minutes each. While I will introduce each panelist more fully before their individual remarks, the panelists include Ali Bakari, Global Mobility Manager for Unilever Corporation; Neil Dornbaum, co-chair of Connolly Foley's Corporate Immigration and Global Mobility Law Practice; Miriam Thelblum, co-founder and executive director of the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration; Lori Jensen, executive director of the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association; Vicki Clark, president of the Cape May County Chamber of Commerce; Teresa Cardinal Brown, director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Again, as a reminder, if you have comments, post them into the chat. And with that, let's start with Ali Bakari of our panel. He's our first panelist, and Ali Bakari is the Global Mobility Manager of Unilever Corporation. Ali has his finger on the pulse of how a major corporation uses immigrant talent to advance corporate objectives. He's also familiar with the obstacles these companies face in the current immigration policy environment. Welcome, Ali, and thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. No, I just want to say definitely excited to be here amongst all of this heavily experienced folks. So it's a privilege. I think really just starting with myself, I've been in the immigration industry in the space, both working in law firms and in-house for big companies from technology to finance, and now with the CPG company for the last about 16 years. So we've seen this, through the last, several administrations and the changing fluctuations that we see with the political environment. So very much connected to what Jorge was talking about, and we see the pulse move back and forth. But overall, holistically, we're waiting, like he said, from like the 80s to see comprehensive immigration reform. Part of my job right now as Global Mobility Manager for North America is I actually also oversee our international moves for Canada. And there's just you look at the two different systems and the disparities, and you can clearly see like we need help to kind of move the needle a little bit forward. Really, just I think I'm going to talk mostly about the employer experience. New Jersey's known for primarily like a hub for technology, entrepreneurship, and just people starting these consulting services and businesses. From what like I'll give you a holistic view of like what we've seen in the last year and a half, right? From the grueling last 4 years of the prior administration, where we saw just everything was restricted, high scrutiny, even if you had prior approvals for employees, no more guarantees, just additional discretion was kind of given. We also saw approval rates for just extensions alone. Like if you had an employee working and you thought everything was fine, then you go to file an extension. We saw approvals decline to about 74%. That's like 1 in 4 employees not getting their visas extended just that easily. And then just off the top of the last year that we've had through, the COVID pandemic, the European travel ban, additional countries, kind of just the heightened fear of, contagion, and then just kind of everything just getting gridlocked. Down to executive orders, then, just closing down the consulates, which is the primary avenue of, inflow of new international talent. So it's just basically brought everything to a grinding halt. I think we were looking forward to the new administration kind of opening up, but we know that the pandemic is still around, very much so. So it's just been a further much, like I feel like the goalpost is a little bit moved further for us. So it's still, as an immigration practitioner, I mean, I know you can agree, it's still very much a struggle. In terms of international talent, also locally, we do try to hire STEM degree graduates. There's a certain thing called the brain drain. So we're very much trying to keep key talent in the United States, specifically the 85% of STEM degree graduates who are international students and are vital to the workforce. But we've also seen a decline in our approval rates for just the H1b lottery this year, for example. We did not fare, and majority of employers did not fare as well as they thought they would. But I mean, ultimately, just this is all driven by, I think, purpose and passion. And the only thing we're serving up right now is really just compassion to say, listen, we understand there are challenges. There are people who have been stuck without the ability to go see their families abroad from employees' perspective. But ultimately, we value that talent because we understand, and there's enough research and white papers to corroborate that, people who come over either in their managerial capacity or specialist capability, they impart knowledge, create additional jobs, whether that's in a big global company or even in a smaller venture where somebody's coming up to open a shop for the first time. Other than that, I think we're seeing some glimpses of some change. Just this week there was a deference memo passed by USCIS, which I'm sure my colleague Neil will be able to speak to a little bit. But it's basically saying, listen, if you were here already, doesn't mean that we're going to send you away. There's some deference to say we approve this person's application, we want to keep this person here, but holistically, like moving the needle, we're very far from just what Jorge talked about in terms of having the manpower to ensure that all the baby boomers who are going to retire have their Social Security and pension, but also just in terms of, like, Canada, for example, has already set aggressive targets to grow from 38 million to 100 million by 2030. We need to kind of follow some of those trends, but we're not all there because it's a highly politicized issue. But from an employer perspective, I cannot just reiterate that it has definitely been challenging. Anybody who relies on specialty talent, whether you're in any industry, can totally corroborate that it's not been easy the last couple of years.
Thanks so much for giving us an inside perspective from a corporation. To the extent that expectation is a cornerstone of how business functions, what we've seen over the last few years is, as you point out, those moving goalposts, and where is expectation and all of that, both in terms of process and substance when it comes to immigration. But we'll circle back when we come to the Q&A. And as a reminder, everyone drop your questions in the chat, and now we'll have a chance to hear from Neil Dornbaum. And I've had the pleasure of working with Neil on many programs over the years. Neil co-chairs Connolly Foley's corporate immigration and global mobility practice and is recognized as one of the most active and distinguished immigration attorneys in New Jersey. He has dedicated his practice for over 30 years to immigration and nationality matters, with a special emphasis on employment-based immigration. Neil has a long list of accomplishments, including serving as chair of the New Jersey chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association and chair of the New Jersey State Bar Association's Immigration, Nationality, and Americanism Committee. Neil has worked with many corporate clients over the years and will share some of his insights gained from his rich experience with us today. Neil, you're on.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to participate. For over 30 years, I have had the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs and numerous industries in the transfer of international personnel and the staffing of foreign professionals. And like many of us, I've been around for the last major comprehensive bill, which was passed back in 1986. So we're looking at over 30 years. But currently, as you just heard from Ali, we really are dealing with crisis level delays in adjudication of applications, petitions, other requests from what are multiple agencies that deal with immigration policies. And those include both the Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Department of Labor, and the Department of Justice. And unfortunately, average processing times prior to COVID had already risen by 101%, resulting in what were unacceptable lengthy timeframes for US employers to onboard new employees, and resulting in gaps in work authorization and overall frustration with caps and quotas, forcing companies to consider policies limiting the hire of foreign nationals, and also adversely and disproportionately impacting our recent graduates of US universities who really have the potential to greatly contribute to the US economy over the course of their careers. Overall, what we've really seen is the positive impact of foreign nationals continues really to be undervalued in the immigration debate. Immigrant entrepreneurs really have been an important part of America's economic success story. Some of the largest and most recognizable American companies have been founded by immigrants or children of immigrants, including household names such as Apple or Costco, and also some of the newcomers to the Fortune 500 list like Broadcom and Intuit. And while we see economists, they disagree on a lot of things, there are two areas: the importance of entrepreneurship to economic growth and job creation, and the oversized role that immigrants play in founding American companies, have broad consensus. And yet, our immigration policy remains stalled at a time when the rate of business formation is at a 4-decade low. And that really presents a major disconnect between the economic and the political realities. If we look at some of the studies like the Center for American Entrepreneurship, which is a nonpartisan policy and advocacy organization, and also a study by the New American Economy, both have found that at least 2 out of every 5 Fortune 500 companies had at least one immigrant or a child of an immigrant founder. And the results are striking. 45% of companies in the 2019 Fortune 500 were in fact founded or co-founded by an immigrant or a child of an immigrant. And among the top 35, that share is 57%. And if we look at New Jersey is one of 7 states that have at least 10 American new Fortune 500 firms with revenues of over $170 million, and they employ over 700,000 workers. So imagine a New Jersey without Celgene or Merck or Honeywell or Burlington or ADP. And given their number and size, these companies have an outsized impact on the state's economy. Research has also shown that the economic benefits of immigrants are lasting. US cities and regions that welcomed immigrants in the past have been linked with higher incomes, less poverty and unemployment, and greater economic attainment today. We also see that immigrants make an outsized contribution to science and technology, whether measured as patent productivity or breakthrough discoveries. In recent years, US-based researchers have been awarded 65% of Nobel Prizes, though more than half of that group was born abroad. But the issue is much bigger than targeting only well-educated. Many foreign-born founders of iconic American companies were poor, they were young, they were fleeing economic and political conditions. If we look at a recent Harvard Business School study, it found that among foreign-born entrepreneurs, those that come here as children have about the best business outcomes for both growth and survival rates. And the Fortune 500 are only a small example of how immigrants and their children create jobs and drive our economy. As you heard before, medium and small businesses are also vital to the US economy and our economy here in New Jersey, employing many more millions at neighborhood stores, restaurants, professional services, and other businesses. So immigrants have a significant role to play, with nearly 3.2 million immigrants running their own businesses. Data also shows that immigrants continue to be more likely to be entrepreneurs than their US counterparts. And this increased propensity for business creation among immigrants is really critical for the US economy, as research shows that nearly all of the net job growth in the United States is attributed to new firms and startups. The evidence on immigrants, entrepreneurship, and economic growth is clear. What we really need now is Congress to take action on a comprehensive immigration bills, which helps us to grow, find, and retain critical personnel that they require. And second, by ensuring the safety and legality of the dreamers to stay and thrive in the country that they call home. During a period of slow growth, declining startup rates, and anemic productivity gains, really the United States really cannot afford not to. So Ryan, thank you. Hopefully we will see some major improvement in these areas.
Thanks so much for making a very clear case of how immigration advances not only our country's interest but our state's interest. And as someone who lives about a mile from Albert Einstein's former home, who came to this country not as an entrepreneur but as a refugee, summing up that, and of course we have Einstein's Alley here, the contributions that immigrants make is enormous. So thanks for your remarks. Our next panelist is Miriam Feldblum. She's co-founder and executive director of the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. The Alliance is a coalition of more than 500 presidents of colleges and universities across the country, including 19 in New Jersey, who are concerned about policy issues that impact immigrant and international students. Miriam will focus her remarks on the challenges facing international students and the resources they bring to the overall American economy. Miriam, thanks so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Nick, and all the organizers. It's great to be on the panel with everyone. Let me start by saying a few words about myself and the President's Alliance to set the context for my remarks. I'm a second-generation immigrant myself, a daughter of a refugee, Holocaust survivor, an immigration scholar, and I grew up in Washington Heights, so I feel connected to New Jersey. We launched the President's Alliance almost 3.5 years ago in response to the previous administration's policies. And as Ryan mentioned, we're now over 500 members strong, presidents and chancellors of public and private colleges and universities, serving over 5 million students in 43 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. I think our growth really shows the engagement of US college leaders who are concerned about the future prospects for immigrant and international students and the many ways that a robust immigration system is crucial for our campuses and country, as we've just all been hearing. The Alliance is singularly and comprehensively focused on the intersection of immigration and higher education, on the issues that impact our students, institutions, and communities. We work to advance just, bipartisan, sensible immigration policies and practices at the federal, state, and institutional levels through policy advocacy, education, and sharing effective practices. We are now out from under siege, but we're also in a newly urgent, pivotal moment. And with the new administration and Congress in place, we at the President's Alliance believe now's the time for all of us in higher education to redouble our efforts and lean in to call on Congress to pass immigration reform, as you heard Jorge speak about as well, whether piecemeal or more broadly, with DREAM legislation a top priority. We also need to work with the administration and partners across sectors to reinvigorate international student mobility. And not only reinvigorate it, but truly modernize our immigration system for the 21st century. To help us all make the case for reform, we launched the Higher Ed Immigration Portal, which has great data, policies, narratives, and resources on undocumented international and refugee students, including by state. So for example, in New Jersey, first and second generation immigrant students make up over 35% of all students in higher ed in New Jersey. The President's Alliance is pursuing 4 areas of advocacy that's related to both international and immigrant students. They all involve policies, processes, priorities, and messaging, and I thought I'd just go through them briefly. The first is undoing the damage from the many harsh policies of the previous administration, which created such a hostile environment for immigrant and international students. This includes engaging in rulemaking, urging executive action, and continuing to support legal challenges. So for example, the Alliance is one of the plaintiffs in a continuing legal challenge to the DOL labor rule and the DHS lottery rule initiated under the previous administration that would have tremendously adverse effect on international students as well as businesses and higher education institutions. That lawsuit is being led by the Chamber of Commerce. Second, we're seeking to address the dramatic delays and closures that are more specifically connected to the pandemic. As you may have heard, the State Department this week announced that students from China, Brazil, and elsewhere could qualify for a national interest exemption if their program starts on August 1st or later. Now that's an essential first policy step that opens the door, but understand there is lots of process work that needs to happen for students to be able to arrive here. This continues to be a top advocacy priority for us, and with international students bringing in over $800 million in New Jersey, this absence impacts campuses and communities in the state. Third, fixing and improving the existing immigration system so it works better for immigrant and international students. There were many problems before 2017, as Jorge has made clear. USCIS has an open comment period now for suggestions about how to reduce barriers and burdens that individuals face in accessing the immigration system. And we're urging our members to submit a comment on what they would like to see fixed and changed. As I mentioned, our top priority legislatively is DREAM legislation, but also supporting broader packages of reform. And on the eve of President Biden's speech this week, our alliance sent a letter to Congress urging passage of the US Citizenship Act. Fourth, and most importantly, at least for international student issues, though perhaps most out of reach, as a country, we need to develop new national policies for international student recruitment and retention to match the 21st century reality and to match our competitors and other countries such as Canada who are already ahead of the curve. We are now behind the curve. We need to welcome in international students and show them through policies, processes, and messaging that there are clear pathways for them to stay and contribute to this country. Let me stop here, Ryan, and happy to go into details as we talk.
Great, thanks, Miriam. I just want to note that Jasmine Garrett from NJBIA has posted links that you wanted to share into the chat. So I want to make sure that people know that that's there. And also a little personal note, my family fleeing Nazi persecution also made their first stop in Washington Heights. And when I think about higher education, immigration, and patriotism linked together, I think of John Witherspoon, who was a president of Princeton University, an immigrant, and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. So all of that is tightly bound together. And thanks for your comments, and we're looking forward to the Q&A. We can come back. Many Americans are aware of the fact that there are programs that allow immigrants into the country to work on a temporary seasonal basis. One of those programs is the H1b program, which allows 66,000 immigrants into the country every year to work in non-agricultural, lower skill occupations. Guest worker programs, as they're often called, have long been controversial and have been criticized from both the left and the right. Our next panelist has an intimate knowledge of the H1b program. As executive director of the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association, Lori Jensen leads a professional association of roughly 400 members to make extensive use of H1b workers and who have a distinct point of view as to how the program should operate. Lori, thank you for joining us today. Still can't hear you, Lori. Your sound's not coming on. Lori, why don't we see if we can figure that out? In the meantime, we'll skip on to our next panelist and come back to you, Lori. Our next panelist is Vicki Clark. Another form of temporary worker comes to the country through the J1 visa program, which is administered by the Department of State. J1 visas are primarily for the purpose of encouraging cultural and educational exchanges between nations. To tell us about the vital importance of J1 visa holders to businesses on the Jersey Shore, we're joined by Vicki Clark, president of the Cape May County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you, Ryan. It's very nice to be with all of you here today and talk to you about the Bridge USA program, or as you said, what is more commonly known as the J1 Visa Summer Work Travel Program, a public diplomacy program through the U.S. Department of State, quite different from the other immigration programs being discussed today. Or you would probably be more familiar if I just said it's how you most often meet the international students at the Jersey Shore in the summertime. Summer Work Travel is a visitor exchange program that allows university students around the world to visit the United States on a temporary visa during their summer break to come experience living and working in America. To provide some scale of the problem that we are experiencing, in a typical year by late April, and today is April 30th, over 70% of participants, approximately 100,000 visiting the United States, would have already had their interview with the expectation that they would arrive by Memorial Day or early June of the year and to begin their summer work travel program. Currently, only 5% of international students have received their visa appointments, and the system does not seem to be opening up at the rate that we need it to be. We are in a very critical juncture for these students to schedule their visa appointments. It is certain there will be significantly less students in 2021, but we cannot yet say how many fewer. The embassies that do respond tell us that J1 visa appointment slots will be very limited, in some cases, maybe 5 appointments per week. There does not seem to be consistency among embassies, and the guidance from the State Department headquarters is unclear at best. The Summer Work Travel Program is a very small but critical part of the New Jersey seasonal tourism industry, which in non-COVID times would typically see about 5,000 students working along the Jersey Shore. Most of those students work in Atlantic City or south in Cape May County. Summer work travel is especially popular in our areas because we simply do not have enough of a year-round population to fill all of the seasonal jobs. Some mistakenly think that international students take jobs away from local workers. Instead, they help sustain and even create jobs by being available when local students are still in school in the early spring and after Labor Day. The summer work travel program is at a critical point of not being available to us for a second year in a row due to students not being able to get these visa appointments. This is primarily caused by a backlog of applications, and a couple of solutions to this problem would be to prioritize these interviews due to the limited timeline for the program that would be meaningful to New Jersey's tourism season. And many students received their visa last year and were ready to come, but the program was shut down due to COVID. We're asking that these students be prioritized and allowed to come for their travel summer work program this year. It is critical for both public diplomacy and local businesses for the program to have a significant showing in 2021. Last year, very few students were able to get here, but the ones that came reported they had a very good experience in spite of COVID. We need long-term protection for this program through education and advocacy at both the regulatory level and the grassroots level. These jobs support American businesses and jobs and do not take opportunities away from Americans. In fact, they do support American jobs by expanding our shoulder seasons and enable seasonal businesses to be fully open and maximize revenues, which support year-round career workforce opportunities. And this is especially important as we rebound for 2021. Businesses with summer work travel students are 89% in tourism-related businesses, and of those businesses, 90% have 100 or fewer employees. It will not cost any taxpayer money or require an act of Congress to prioritize these visas in a national interest for economic recovery. All we need is for the Biden administration and the Department of State to simply fix the issues that are holding back this program. Again, I thank you very much for this opportunity and look forward to taking any questions that I can from the audience. Thank you, Ryan.
Vicki, thanks so much. And let's see if Lori can come back on and whether we fix the audio. All right, looks like at the moment, Lori, how are you doing?
I am
Hi.
well, thank you. I apologize for that. I don't know, there's always technical glitches at some point during a presentation, right? So hopefully that will be the only technical glitch we have.
Lori, great. Great to hear you, and looking forward to hear from you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to join. This has been very helpful, and hopefully this will be helpful for you as well. So the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association represents hundreds of businesses in New Jersey, encompassing the nursery, greenhouse, grower, landscaper, and garden center industries. So New Jersey's nursery and floriculture crop industry continues to be New Jersey's leading agricultural sector and is valued over $500 million. According to a 2019 census of horticulture, that is an increase of $93 million from the previous census, which took place in 2014. Think about that. This industry is higher in New Jersey's sale of corn, blueberries, cranberries, other fruits and vegetables. New Jersey has also moved up to rank 5th in the nation for nursery stock sales. So nursery production accounts for over 40% of New Jersey's agricultural output, and the green industry in New Jersey is estimated to contribute almost $4 billion to the state's economy. Our member businesses rely heavily on seasonal labor, and much of that workforce is migratory or from an immigrant background. Our industry is labor intensive, and the availability of locally sourced labor just doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's just not enough to cover the needs of the industry. So one of the ways that we've tried to help as an association is that with the labor problem is we actually launched an apprenticeship program. It's a registered United States Department of Labor approved apprenticeship program for landscape technicians. We have 2 occupations actually in the landscaping realm, and it's offering an opportunity for on-the-job training with a career. And we have not had one apprentice actually apply since we launched the program last year. We've also have a job board on our website, and we've participated in career fairs with colleges, And we actually held an immigration panel pre-COVID with industry leaders to try to brainstorm on ways that we can help the industry. I'm happy to actually report that some of those leaders were actually immigrants themselves in the past. So probably good time for some good news at the moment. So the impact of COVID. So here's the good news. The pandemic has actually had a very positive impact on our industry. As folks remained at home last year, they focused on those staycations. They wanted to enhance their outdoor living space, grow their own plants, their own vegetables, and generally focused on improving their health and environment. That's a win for us. It's great news, and our industry actually did reap the benefits of that newfound interest in all things green. Once again, supply did not meet demand, not only with plant material, which had its own issues with shipping, but also with the labor force. We couldn't keep up with this new demand. So just a little perspective from some of our members. So we have a large, we have a large native plant nursery, relies on H2A workers because it's an agricultural industry. He went this route because he was unable to hire Americans to do this kind of work. They just won't do it. And although there are many challenges in securing these workers, he had no choice but to do it. 70% of his workforce is from the H2A program. He reminds me that they are not taking jobs away from Americans. His seasonal workers are paid not only a decent wage, but a wage that is well above minimum wage. And as he says, they are not cheap labor, they're actually good labor. He has helped some of them actually become US citizens, and he considers many of them as family. I was actually just down there a couple weeks ago and met some of his workers, and just great people, and just love what they do. They have a passion for the industry, which pretty much everybody in our industry does. So landscaping companies, which is another field that we support. So they sign contracts with customers prior to the beginning of the season. So contracts are signed in the fall for the spring or summer. So they're taking a risk because they don't know if they'll be receiving their H2B workers that they need in order to perform the work that they just signed that said they were going to do. Many companies that I've talked to have reported the loss of customers because they can't do the work that they said they would do. And most every company that I talked to over the last couple months, help wanted, help wanted. It's all over the place. They put it on social media. It's on their trucks. I mean, they're trying desperately. So just a little bit of talk about that H1b Cap. It was mentioned a little bit earlier. During the first 3 days of 2021, seasonal businesses requested 96,641 H1b workers. There is a 66,000 annual visa cap for these temporary jobs. So the 33,000 cap for the second half of the fiscal year was reached by February 12th. Okay. In April, the Department of Homeland Security did announce that they were making 22,000 supplemental H1b visas available this fiscal year, but that leaves roughly 43,000 temporary positions vacant. It's helpful, but it's not enough, and it's not soon enough. Think about it. When did spring cleanup come? March? So, we're already behind the gun on this. So the economic harm caused by these workforce issues will not only be felt by the H1b employers that aren't getting the workers, but also the American workers that also work for those companies. If there's no workers, there's no need for a bookkeeper. There's no need for, other positions. So it's not just affecting, the employers. So the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association member businesses, they're aligned professionally through the growing and selling and installation of plants. They're all great businesses and they're very passionate about what they do. They're dedicated owners. They take care of their workers. When it comes to immigration, specifically as it relates to labor, their needs are similar. So the biggest problem that we would like to see fixed as part of a comprehensive immigration reform would be the guest worker program for ag, and also the availability of enough workers that landscape companies desperately need to fill those needs of New Jersey's residents, and with a timeline that actually matches their work session. So happy to answer any questions.
Perfect, Lori. Thanks so much. And I'm going to circle back to some of those limitations in the Q&A. And finally, our last panelist, Teresa Cardinal Brown. We're fortunate to have with us today one of the most knowledgeable and experienced immigration policy experts in the country. Teresa Cardinal Brown serves as Director of the Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C. The center seeks to combine the best policies from both the Democratic and Republican parties and to fashion solutions to major policy challenges that work for all Americans. We asked Teresa to share her vision of what immigration reform should look like in our post-pandemic 21st century world, and to give some insight into the state of play in Washington on immigration. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you to NJBIA and NJBIC and Einstein's Alley for inviting me here. Jorge spoke a little bit earlier about the status quo in DC when it comes to immigration reform. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. But first, Ryan sort of spoke about the Bipartisan Policy Center and who we are. We've been involved in immigration policy since 2013. The way we work is we bring together, as you mentioned, Republicans and Democrats to try to find comprehensive and compromise positions on immigration. We've been promoting immigration reform since 2013. We've been involved in all the major efforts in Congress, including this year. So what is the state of bipartisanship on immigration reform right now? Well, we've already heard about the Biden administration's legislation, the U.S. Citizenship Act, that he promised during the campaign to introduce on day one, and it was introduced in Congress. That is a very broad bill that would legalize almost all of the undocumented people in the country. It would also provide more technology solutions at the border for border security. It would expand immigrant visas in the family-based and employment-based categories in the United States. And it also makes other changes to our long needed immigration system. But as of right now, this bill is only a Democratic bill. And it has not moved yet. It has not been able to pass the House or the Senate, in part because it just doesn't have the votes. So what does that mean? Well, congressional Democrats and Republicans have been talking about immigration for a very long time. Democrats have tried to move various pieces of legislation and have looked to get bipartisan support. Republicans also have priorities, but there have been fewer bipartisan bills. Some of those bills have actually passed this year, however. The House has passed two bills with bipartisan votes, one called the Dream and Promise Act that addresses the status of DACA recipients, Dreamers, and TPS holders in the United States. And the other would address comprehensively our agricultural workforce, as we just heard Lori talk about, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which would not only provide legalization for many of the undocumented farm workers in the United States and a path to citizenship, but would also reform the temporary agricultural visa program to make it both more useful for employers and help the workers in those programs. There are also a couple of bipartisan working groups that are actively talking about immigration legislation in the Senate and in the House. So while it may seem that there's a lot of partisanship, and certainly if all you listen to is TV pundits and people who are talking on TV, you would think that there's a lot of division, but there's also a lot of agreement on things that can be done. So what are those policy options that can get bipartisan support? The most bipartisan legislation actually comes when we focus on legal immigration reforms. You've heard today from a lot of the panelists why changes to our legal immigration system are necessary to help economies such as those in New Jersey, to help grow our country, on innovation, entrepreneurship, support local businesses. There's a lot of reasons, but our legal immigration system is so fundamentally broken. And you heard Jorge talk about the long backlogs. You've heard many people talk about the difficulties in actually getting people approved. This is an area that is ripe for change. The focus, however, is less necessarily on specific visa categories and the alphabet soup you've already heard of, H1b, H2b, H2A, but more on areas of industry focus or types of immigrants. So for example, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act could be seen as a comprehensive immigration bill for agriculture. And so we believe also that there are opportunities to look at comprehensive bills that may be for smaller portions of the immigrant labor force or the immigrant workforce. And those are ripe opportunities for policy discussion. We've seen, for example, bipartisan support for something called the Healthcare Workforce Resilience Act, which would recognize the key efforts that many immigrant nurses, doctors, and other healthcare professionals have provided us during the pandemic with legal status or a path to citizenship that they may not have available to them right now. There's also widespread bipartisan support to provide permanent status and a path to citizenship for DACA recipients and dreamers. 70% or more of Republicans and Democrats support this pathway. But what has been blocking it? Well, the idea that somehow it needs to be a trade-off for something else, politically for Republicans or for Democrats. But we think that that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. When there is such bipartisan support, there should be a way to move that forward. Lastly is the question of what do we do about our border? This comes up a lot, particularly right now as we are seeing unprecedented numbers of unaccompanied children and other migrants from Central America arriving at our border. Should we have to deal with that situation before we fix our legal immigration system or address the status of folks already in the United States? That's a key question. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, certainly not from a policy point of view, but sometimes for political deals to be made, we need to figure out how we link up issues. And there are also bipartisan talks there. Recently in the House and the Senate, a bipartisan and bicameral Border Solutions Act was proposed by senators from Arizona and Texas that would fundamentally look at the humanitarian needs at the border, as well as how we have a fair and orderly process for those migrants who are asking for asylum in the United States. It's a good start. It's a good faith effort to try to address this in a way that's not just about throwing more money and walls and Border Patrol agents at our border. You've also heard from all of these leaders about how the needs are in their industries for workforce. And so for this audience, I would say, how can business leaders be impactful when trying to address Congress and get them to move on legislation? You've already heard some of it. Outreach to members of Congress, but also outreach to your state and local leaders so they in turn can also reach out to Congress. In fact, your stories need to be told far and wide so they become part of the public discourse on immigration. Many Americans hear only about immigration from headlines in the news, from snippets on cable, from whatever somebody may post on their Facebook page, but they need to have a broader sense of exactly how immigrants and immigration fits into the economies that they live in, the neighborhoods that they live in, and their workforces. And so telling your stories is really important. What are the priorities for your industry or company area? Emphasize how important access to international personnel is, not only for your business, but for the US jobs that your business has, how those workers support other American workers, and what jobs are dependent on that. That's very important. I think we also need to think seriously about what is it we're asking for. We've heard a lot of the needs here from industries and from employers. I think that's important to tell, but we also need to be realistic. Think about what are the priorities of the other side and where can we find common ground? What might be ways to engage their priorities as well as your own? That's the give and take of legislating that, frankly, Congress has kind of forgotten how to do. So we need to show that to them. Talk to immigrant advocates in your community. Figure out where there's common ground. How can you work together? All of that helps move the ball forward,
Teresa,
both in Washington and locally.
I'm going to jump in if you don't mind, because I want to give the full panel a chance to respond to questions and answers. But let me kind of try to draw a link between you as the last panelist and our keynote speaker, Jorge, who will join us for the Q&A. One of the focuses in prior efforts on immigration reform was resistance to working on immigration in a piecemeal fashion, which in a way seems to be the recipe that we're calling on, and certainly that you've outlined in your remarks. So let me throw that issue at Jorge. Jorge, you talked a lot about common ground, which is, I think, consistent with what Teresa is saying, and working on areas of overlap. Americans for Prosperity, the organization with which you're affiliated, is one of the leading conservative organizations in the United States. Yet the views you're articulating on immigration do not seem to resonate these days within the Republican Party. What is Americans for Prosperity doing to shift opinion within the party on these questions so that we might be able to act in areas of common ground?
Thanks for that question, Ryan. And certainly over the years, oftentimes Americans for Prosperity's positions could be seen as much more conservative. but we ourselves, we consider ourselves, we try to stay away from the labels. In fact, that's part of the thing we believe is kind of going wrong in Washington. If you put a label, you become part of a box and you don't really get to work outside of that. We reject that idea and thinking that what we can really do is bring together the people who have the common ground, who feel that they want to see something done versus get something or leave the status quo. All of that said, there's oftentimes when we do work very closely with more conservative members on a number of different issues, and we never hesitate to share with anyone our positions on all of our issues. I wish it was as simple as just sharing things and somehow our group having an opportunity to actually change an entire party, but that's simply not how it works. However, it is important when we have relationships that have been built on trust, and that if we have open channels of communication, that we remind folks the kind of foundational underpinnings of why we're advocating for something. Right nowadays, it almost seems as a knee-jerk reaction that you're advocating for policy X solely for a win for X party, right? The idea that all of these different theories or ideas or positions could be linked to underlying foundational values seems to be lost in today's debate. But that is certainly where we come from, right? So all of this is based on why we believe in people, why we think America should be welcoming, and the idea that being open to the contributions of immigrants actually allows us to have a stronger America, a stronger economy, allows us to be the leading country across others, right? That we go back to those foundational principles and then do share them with individuals that we've built trust with over time. It takes work, right? I wish I can say it in an easier fashion, because oftentimes, as Teresa mentioned, a lot of folks only hear headlines, only see certain pieces, and they are pushed into this false choice. You either have to be pro-immigrant or pro-America. We reject that, and having the ability to talk to people around seeing that those choices are not the only options on the table is really the work that we dedicate ourselves to, so that we can show them we're not asking them to leave their political affiliations. In fact, we're actually encouraging them to still stand on those, but see that those foundational principles are actually advanced when you address issues like immigration.
All right, thanks so much. And just to kind of pick up on that point, and also using Teresa's comment as a springboard for another question, let me flag that here in New Jersey, if I've done my counting correctly, on the farm workforce bill, we have a unified congressional delegation that the entire New Jersey delegation voted, Republicans and Democrats voted in support of the farm workforce bill. So Lori, the question is to you. Teresa's kind of outlined kind of the benefits of that type of thing, but what would the farm workforce bill do for your members? Does it impact your members? We've talked about H2A and H2Bs. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ryan. So we again, because we cover the entire green industry, we have companies that are growers of plants that get shipped out throughout the entire country and have hundreds of workers. So they have housing, they have all of the rules, and they work really hard to make sure that they're following all of the rules that are put out for them. So, but the process is so difficult and so bogged down with red tape that some companies are just like, you know what, forget it. We're not going to do this anymore. It's not worth all that time and energy and effort. So if there was some sort of streamline bill that's going to, make it easier and make it definite that they can get the workers and when they need them, that would be huge, which then of course would help the New Jersey economy. Because if they scale down and decide not to grow as much and sell as much, that's going to hurt the rest of us.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Ollie, you brought up Canada. And so this is a question both to you and to Neil. Does the Canadian, can you just very quickly touch on the framework for the Canadian immigration system? And with that system, is that workable here in the United States?
So on the workable piece, I'll defer to Neil, but I can give you a snippet. They're basically working on a very much a points-based system, which a lot of other countries are working on as well, and is also attracting more professional immigrants, who are going to be part of their workforce. I think the dynamic is like 2/3 professional, 1/3 family, versus it's the flip in the U.S. where it's 2/3 family and only 1/3 professional. Right? But it's very much based on your education, your years of experience, and preferred. They're even tapping into something that Miriam's probably going to talk about is like their international students that are already present in Canada get preferred points basically for already being kind of assimilated into the Canadian culture and economy.
Great, thanks. Neil, any other additional comments?
Yeah, I would say that, for the American system, the big problems that we're really facing, as you're hearing across all of the industries, is we have a lot of competing interests here. Certainly for the employers that we work with on a daily basis, there are really 3 areas that really need major improvement. One is the elimination of the H1b Cap in the lottery system, because it's the most common work visa for professionals here in the United States, but it's subject to numerical caps, which are woefully inadequate for dealing with the workforce that we're dealing with. If we just look at students, we have about 1 million foreign students studying here in the United States at any given time. About a quarter of them, let's say, graduate each year, but we only have 65,000 visas plus an additional 20,000 for graduates of master's and PhD programs. Those numbers don't work, and that doesn't even count for my companies that are trying to transfer an individual. They want to hire a vice president from outside of the United States. I've got to tell them we can't file until next April. We only have a 1 in 4 chance that your employee will be able to even come into the United States to fill this vice president role. And then I can't even bring them in until October of 2022. So it makes no sense. Number 2 is we have to eliminate the quotas that are based in the employment categories. We have a woefully inadequate number of 140,000 that's been sitting there for years and years and years. And that means we only have 10,000 visas for entrepreneurs in a given year. We only have 40,000 visas available for skilled or professional workers in various categories. So those numbers really need to be tied more to what is the actual need so that they can move each year. And similar to what Canada does is in the point system, they're able to adjust those points as to what the needs are. And third, the other thing we might want to be looking at is we're looking at dreamers and we're looking at individuals that are going to be looking at a system that can take a decade or longer for them to get it back into a legal permanent resident status. So why don't we look at something like 245I that's currently available? It could be reinstated. That would allow individuals that are already in the queue to move quickly through the system, and it would also bring in high levels of revenue. So I'd be interested to see if Teresa has seen those kind of discussions up on the Hill, because those 3 things would make a big difference for the businesses I represent.
Great, thanks, Neil. Lori really kind of hammered home the point. We went after the issue that, why aren't we hiring U.S. workers and providing these visas for individuals? And in her bailiwick, the H2A and H2B, there's lots of testing, the apprenticeship program you listed, you cannot find the U.S. workers. So Vicki, the J1 program, one of the concerns that may be out there is, go to the Jersey Shore, we have these J1 students there. Is there availability for U.S. workers? Do these J1s displace U.S. workers? And do you have a job for my teenage son?
There are so many jobs. Our businesses are at a crisis point. They cannot get people to even apply for the jobs. We are at a very concerned state for our industry this summer. We are expecting to have a very strong summer season, but the tourism industry is really dependent on delivering exceptional customer service. And in order to do that, you need to be fully staffed. And as I said in my remarks, the summer work travel program is a small but critical part of that staff. It allows us to really, broaden out our availability to the customer. And these students they're here to work and experience living the American life. And they don't have the other obligations that the American worker does. They're not, going to birthday parties or have football practice or something. These students, They want to work every hour, every shift they can get. They will often work 2 or 3 jobs because that is what they are here to do. They have made a hefty investment in order to be here. And that experience is about being, on the job. They want to perfect their English speaking skills. And so that is what they are here to do. And it's not because they are better workers than Americans. It is because that is what they have come here to do. So they are not taking American jobs. I always like to use the example that employers that use the summer work travel program, they often, those businesses, let's just take an example of a big boardwalk pier. If they are not open all the hours that they normally are, the businesses that are close to that pier, pizza shop, boardwalk game, or whatever, they will close down. They're not open all the hours that they used to be because, why? Because that pier shut down. So businesses that are not even employing J1 students, their staff is losing hours, losing shifts. So it affects everybody, and people don't think that. So that's why it's so important that we have these students. As I said, they do elongate our season in the spring and the fall. It's a win-win for everybody.
Great. Vicki, thanks so much. I know Miriam has posted and Teresa's posted information in the chat. That's really helpful. But Miriam, let me get into a question to you as well. One of the significant goodies in the Biden proposal relates to students coming out of the STEM program. Kind of a fast track in a way for permanent status. Some have criticized the focus there in the STEM fields and that it should include humanities as well. Can you comment on that?
Sure. And it's been just great listening to everybody. I would say that the last time that the Congress tried to do comprehensive immigration reform in 2013, that facilitated pathway for international graduates was actually broader. It was broader in terms of the academic degrees and in terms of the academic fields. So we would certainly encourage Congress to go broader, not just to look at STEM, but to look at other academic fields and not just look at PhD candidates in STEM, because we know whether it's, a baccalaureate degree, a master's degree, a PhD, and sometimes an associate's degree, all of our community colleges, four-year colleges are working together, and they represent, I think, really vital ways for international students to come study and contribute to the U.S. So we're certainly encouraging that. In our letter to the members of Congress around the U.S. Citizenship Act, we applaud the bill, and we also encourage some further exploration. And I would say just overall, talking about Canada, talking about, you think about the UK or Australia or other countries, they are actually developing what's our national strategy? How can we recruit talent and also show them that there are clear pathways? We don't have a national strategy. So while again, I applaud, let's fix, I don't want to stop. I don't want to wait for the national strategy, but we also have to keep our eyes, as Teresa and her group, as Jorge and others, we have to keep our eyes on where we need to go in order to really, to really be able to compete well internationally and nationally.
Miriam, thanks so much. And Teresa, let me just give you the last word on this. Maybe you can comment on what everyone's talked about, and both in the answers to questions, but also their main comments as well.
Well, I think, what you've heard is both the need for change, the difficulty that the current system poses for just about everybody who has to interact with it, whether you're talking immigrants, family members, U.S. sponsors, U.S. schools, universities, or employers. The system is broken in so many ways. And that's why we've talked for a very long time about the idea of comprehensive immigration system reform, because the system as a whole is broken and every piece needs fixing. That's a real challenge for a Congress that's a hard time passing any legislation. So to kind of wrap back around to something Jorge said really early, Congress needs to pass something, anything, on a bipartisan basis, hopefully, just to build back that muscle and prove that it can. And oh, by the way, if it passes something on immigration, the sky's not going to fall. They're not going to have their electoral prospects completely ruined for the future just because they voted on an immigration bill. That's what we have to get back to. The idea that immigration isn't a third rail. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. We need to make progress because we've done nothing for 30 or more years. We are so far behind the rest of the world in figuring out how we want our immigration system to work. Other countries tweak their immigration system and make changes to it every year. And here we are stuck in the 80s and 90s. That is just inconceivable. And we see the impacts of that broken immigration system everywhere, from the status of millions of undocumented people in the United States who've been living and working here for 20 plus years, to the challenges that we've heard of from employers just trying to use the existing immigration system to supplement their workforce in key ways, to family members who wait decades, sometimes lifetimes, to reunite in the United States. This is all wrong, and Americans know that. And so I think the number one thing I would recommend to everyone watching this program is you don't have to know the details of immigration reform. You don't have to know what needs to be done, but what you should do is tell your members of Congress they can no longer kick this can down the road. Do something, get it done. We will not vote for you just because you tell us, well, we tried and the other side wouldn't let us. That's not enough anymore. Work together, get it done, and stop kicking this can down the road.
Teresa, that's a perfect way to wrap up the panel discussion. And thanks so much to everybody. And let me pass the program back to Katherine.
Thank you so much to Ryan and a wonderful panel. This was a great discussion. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nick Montalto, who organized this informative event, to tell us a little bit about the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition. Nick is a member of the Einstein's Alley Board, who is a founder and coordinator of the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition. He's CEO of Diversity Dynamics and has served as president of the New Jersey Immigration Policy Network. And he's been a special advisor to the Program on Immigration and Democracy at Rutgers, and he manages the American Immigrant Portal, Policy Portal, excuse me, Nick. Over to Nick.
Thank you, Katherine. It's been a pleasure to work with you and Ryan, as well as the entire team today. I find the remarks of the panelists have been inspiring and informative, and I want to thank all of you, our terrific keynote, and also a shout out to Michelle Sekurka and the great staff at NJBIA. I think we've emerged from today's session with a greater understanding of the importance of immigration reform to our state and national economy. If you will indulge me for a few moments, I'd like to offer some concluding remarks. Immigration has been a foundational force in the history of our country. Immigrants have brought their talent, their labor, their creativity, and their enterprise. And these gifts have benefited all Americans. Over the past year of the pandemic, many of us have come to appreciate the critical role they have played in various essential industries. In the future, as in our past, immigrants will continue to play a vital role in our economy. The policies and the laws governing immigration, of course, must change with the times. That is why the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition believes that public discussion of the challenging and complex issues associated with immigration must be strongly encouraged. We're also committed to building consensus on immigration policy across party and ideological lines. The coalition, of course, recognizes that there must be limits placed on the number of immigrants admitted to the United States. We're not against limits. Rather, we want them to be reasonable, flexible, based on research and beneficial to all Americans. I'd like to extend an open invitation to all of you who are not currently members of the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition to join our movement. We grow in strength and influence the larger we become. Participating in the coalition is an easy step. You can join either as an organization or as an individual. Joining simply means that you endorse our work, not that you must invest any time in advancing our work, unless of course you choose to do so. There's no fee to join the coalition. The only requirement is that you support our mission and principles. You can find more about the coalition as well as a membership form on our website, www.njbusinessimmigration.org. I believe there will be a screen sharing with the coalition name, as well as I'm also giving you an email if you'd like to get back to me with any suggestions or any comments on today's event. I wanted to also mention before we close that we have 2 upcoming programs that may be of interest to you. Last year, the coalition received a research grant from a wonderful organization in New York City called New American Economy to produce a report on the contributions of immigrants to the economy in Mercer County. This is the second such grant that the coalition has received. We received an earlier grant to look at immigration in Middlesex County in partnership with the Middlesex Chamber. We will be unveiling the Mercer County report at an event with the Princeton-Mercer Regional Chamber in 2 months' time. Finally, I want to bring to your attention that we are beginning the next round of awards under our Immigrant Entrepreneur of the Year program. And we'd like to encourage you, if you have friends or colleagues that you think would be deserving of this award to submit a nomination form. So thank you for your attention, and we hope you will join us in advancing the goal of a modernized, bipartisan, evidence-based, and humane immigration program. And with that, I'll turn the program back to Katherine.
Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you to the New Jersey Business Immigration Coalition, NJBIA, and its great staff for all their hard work, and all the wonderful speakers and panelists who participated in this very informative program. You know, Teresa said legal immigration reforms are key, and we might have a glimmer of bipartisan hope. I found this quote from George W. Bush very interesting. He recently wrote, "Immigration is not a problem. It is a source, and it's not a source of discord, but it's a great and defining asset of the United States." And 2 nights ago, President Biden painted a picture of a better thought out administration approach ahead. The stars may finally be aligning as we tell our stories and, as Jorge said, look for common ground. And I will quote Teresa again because she said, "It's up to all of us to do something." Thank you for sharing your morning with us. Thank you all.